Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, we are going to present about social context of second language acquisition. I'm Zilta Masyanabila and my partner is.
And my name is Dewi Santri. Okay, let's explain communicative competence. Communicative competence is the basic of sociolinguistic field. This means it focuses not only vocabulary, phonology, grammar, and other aspects of linguistic structure, but also a speaker is required to know how to communicate properly. So what it means that a speaker has to know how to use the vocabulary, phonology, and grammar properly, and also other aspects of linguistic structure. And then a speaker must know how to socialize with society. Third is the social and cultural knowledge speakers influence the use and the interpretation of linguistic forms. In this sentence, explains that the social and cultural knowledge is really influence of the use and linguistic forms. Linguistic forms is a meaningful unit of speech, such as part of word, or a sentence. If you go back to the previous study, then you will learn word formation. It explains like suffix, prefix, and so on. So, we can conclude that communicative competence should happen because of microsocial and macrosocial factors. Let's move to microsocial factors. There are 3 microsocial factors here. First, second language variation. Second, input and interaction. Third, interaction as the basic genesis of language. Alright, let's discuss one by one. First, second language variation. Variables occur in what learners know and can produce as they progressively achieve higher level of second language proficiency. Multiple linguistic forms which are systematically or predictably used by different speakers of a language occur at every linguistic level. These variables depends on the communicative context. Here, there are 3 contexts. These are linguistic context, psychological context, and microsocial context. Linguistic context is elements of language form and function associated with the variable element. Psychological context is factors associated with the amount of attention which is being given to language form during production. And last, microsocial context is features of setting or situation and interaction which relate to communicative events within which language is being produced, interpreted, and negotiated. Okay, finally we move to the last microsocial factors, which is interaction as the basic genesis of language. There are sociocultural, interpersonal interaction, and intrapersonal interaction. Sociocultural here means interaction not only facilitates language learning, but is a causative force in acquisition. Learning occurs when simple innate mental activities are transformed into higher order, more complex mental functions. Next, interpersonal interaction means communicative events and situations which occur between people.
Zone of proximal development is an area of potential development where the learner can achieve that potential only with assistance. Scaffolding is verbal guidance which an expert provides to help a learner perform any specific task, or the verbal collaboration of peers to perform a task which would be too difficult for any one of them individually. And last, intrapersonal interaction. Interpersonal interaction means communication that occurs within an individual zone when reading, private speech, and inner speech. Alright, the next material will be delivered by Miss Devi Santri.
Well, then the macrosocial factors we will consider are at several levels in the ecological context of second language acquisition. First, global and national status of first language and second language. Second, boundaries and identities. Third, institutional forces and constraints. Fourth, social categories. And fifth, circumstance of learning. The explanation of global and national status of first language and the second language. Language have power and status at global and national levels for both symbolic and practical reasons. An important symbolic function of language is political identification and cohesion. We see this is in the USA, for example, where English is generally accepted as the single national language, and most people consider it important for national unity that all citizens be able to use one language. Boundaries and identities, part of the identity function of language, is accomplished by creating or reinforcing national boundaries. But linguistic boundaries often also social context of second language acquisition. Institutional force and constraints within the bounds of nations and communities. Social institutions are systems which are established by law, custom, or practice to regulate and organize the life of people in public domains, their politics, religion, and education. Social categories. People are categorized according to many socially relevant dimensions. Their age, sex, ethnicity, education level, occupation, and economic status. Such as categorization often includes what experience they have, how they are perceived by others, what is expected of them. And the final macrosocial factors in this ecological context of second language acquisition that we will consider are circumstance of learning. We begin with learners' prior educational experience. These are part of the larger social context within which second language acquisition takes place, because learning begins with children's first experience with the families into which they are born, the communities to which they belong, and the cultural environment within which they live. By the time children begin their formal education at the age of 5 or 6, they have already internalized many of the basic values and beliefs of their native culture, learn the rules of behavior which are considered appropriate for the role in the community, and establish the procedures for continued socialization. So, the conclusion of this chapter is learning a second language for communicative purposes requires knowledge and skills for using it appropriately, as well as knowing aspects of linguistic forms and how they are organized. Taking a social perspective, in this chapter we have seen ways in which second language interpretation and production are influenced by contextual factors, how the nature of social interaction may facilitate or inhibit second language acquisition, and how outcomes of learning may be determined by the broad ecological context of second language acquisition. The first language we are born into, and our success or failure in acquiring a particular second language whether through formal or informal means, can profoundly influence the entire trajectory of our lives. Well, that's all about our presentation in this chapter. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.